show out here together for us, and as Manzanar continues to expand its telling of the local and tribal history in the valley, it means a lot that we can showcase an artist that explores themes of local Indigenous existence here. So thank you, Topah, for sharing your art and for coming in today to talk about it. And after the presentation, you'll have a chance to ask him questions as well. Topah Spoonhunter is an enrolled member of the Northern Arapaho Tribe and grew up on the Big Pine Paiute Reservation in Big Pine, California. His professional career has included work for nonprofit organizations, local governments, and various tribal governments. He is a self-taught artist and designer. Please join me in welcoming Topah Spoonhunter.
I was raised in Big Pine, California, on the reservation there. Grew up in the valley my whole life. I did go away to school. Went down south for a little bit, then I went to Kansas for a little bit, went to college. After that, I came back and I wanted to work for the community here. So I started to work for the tribal government in Bishop. Worked there for a little while, then I moved to Reno for a little bit. I was up there, did some different work here and there. Really my background is, my education has been in business. That's what I went to school for. So I do have a business degree, but art has always been something that I've done. It might not always be something I took seriously, but it's always been something ever since I was little. I always kind of gravitated toward it, and I would be drawing something or trying to create something. It was always just a way for me to, I guess, maybe express myself and to get my ideas and thoughts out. So it's always been something I've done. But lately I've tried to do a little bit more with it. So that's kind of where you kind of see the progression of my art now. And it's just something I've always tried to do. I feel like it's a good release for me, but it's also, art and design I also feel is very important, because you can actually use that as a tool to help change people's perspectives. You can change people's minds with it. You can change their outlook on things, and I feel like that's a very powerful tool. And so that's something I've tried to use too, to try to inspire people, to try to get certain ideas and points across. My family has always had the biggest influence on me. My mom and my dad, they both did a very good job in raising me and my brothers and sisters. I have 7 siblings, and although they'll be the first to admit they weren't perfect, I feel like my parents did a very good job in raising us. They provided us a very strong core family, a very safe home environment. They also exposed us to a lot of things that had an influence on me as I grew up and later on in life. So I always feel like that's kind of been my biggest advantage that I've had, is that I've had a very good childhood and a very good family to fall back on. As I mentioned, my parents and my family have been a big influence on me, but one thing that they did a very good job of was exposing us to our culture. They not only just taught us about it, but they showed us how to do it. They showed us how to incorporate that into our lives, and I feel like that has been very important for me. They showed us the value of it and how you could actually still use a lot of your culture now today and how it can benefit you. Also, part of that too is other tribal cultures. So again, my parents and my family, they really exposed me to other cultures, not just the Paiute culture here, which is where we grew up, which is where we're familiar with, but also other tribal cultures from all over North America. It was something that I didn't really, when I was younger, I didn't really take notice of it. But as I got older, I started to really see the value in those other cultures and how important those were, and how important it was just to be exposed to those and just to learn about those. And the other thing you'll kind of see in the art that I do and the things that I do, just my life in general, my own preferences, the things that I like, those will come out, and I'll highlight those in the work that I do. And we'll talk a little bit about that too, but you can kind of see that even in the pieces that are out here, that's really a reflection of me individually as a person. Those are the things that I like, the things that I find appealing, that I've used in my life and that I incorporate into my art. So with tribes, and right now I'm speaking mostly about North American tribes in the United States. So to kind of make that distinction because there are tribes all over North and South America. First Nations Canadians, there's tribes in Central America, South America. Kind of what I'm going to talk about here pertains mostly to United States-based tribes. And that's more of a political thing. But there's tribes in Canada, like I said, Mexico, Central America, South America, just as much as tribes as anybody else. But there is kind of a distinction there because of the way different countries have worked with tribes and acknowledged them. It's a political thing, and it's kind of, I just have to acknowledge that. So with tribes, I kind of explain it like this. There's really two sides to tribes. There's the cultural side, which is the language, the ceremonies, the customs, traditions. That's kind of the beautiful side of the tribe. That's the stuff that's really interesting. That's the stuff that's really cool to learn about and to see. But there's also another side of tribes, and it's more of the political side. And this is actually the side of the tribe that most people deal with, even though they don't really realize it. When you start to deal with things like tribal sovereignty, the reservation system, federal government Indian policy, land and water rights, treaty rights, that's all interactions on the political level with the tribe. It doesn't necessarily have a lot to do with their culture, but it's more of their political situation there and different governments working with them. So again, for United States-based tribes, there are over 560 federally recognized Indian tribes in the United States. In California, there are 109. California actually has the highest number of tribes, federally recognized tribes of any state. Now, even though a lot of these tribes do have some things in common, they also have a ton of differences. Not only just their language and culture, but their whole structure, their government, and their communities are going to be different. Now, locally, we have those tribes listed right there. The Ute tribe, they're actually out in Benton. The Bishop Paiute tribe, the Big Pine Paiute tribe, Fort Independence tribe, Lone Pine, and Timbishaw. Now, these are all federally recognized tribes. And what that basically means is if you ask the federal government how many tribes there are in their own valley, they would tell you there's those tribes right here. And again, on a political level, what that means is the federal government acknowledges those tribes and acknowledges those tribal governments. Now, part of, as I mentioned, there's a tribal government. So each of those tribes is considered a sovereign nation. So what that means is that they actually have the ability to create their own laws and government. They have the ability to hold elections. They have the ability to operate courts. They have the ability to have authority over their territories, over their reservations. And so that's one of the main things that, as I mentioned, the whole political side of working with tribes is, that's kind of the stuff that the rest of America, when they deal with the tribe or when they work with the tribe, that's kind of what they're working with. They're working with those tribal laws. They're working with the tribal governments. They're working with the different regulations that tribes have to follow rather than the state. So that's something to mention too, just because that all comes into play when you're talking about a tribe. That's all part of it. Now, out there at the bottom, tribes also have the ability to determine their own citizenship, or what's also known as enrollment. Now, I want to talk about that a little bit because of the fact that I am not an enrolled member of a tribe here. Even though I grew up here, even though my mom is an enrolled member of the Big Pine Tribe, I am not an enrolled member of a local tribe. I do consider it my community, my people. I grew up here. This is part of who I am. But I'm actually an enrolled member of the Northern Arapaho Tribe, which is their reservation is actually in Wyoming on the Wind River Reservation. That's where they're at. Now, the reason why I want to mention that is, again, it's more of a political thing because of the fact that tribes do determine who can and cannot be a member of their tribe. The same way the United States has requirements for who can be a U.S. citizen, tribes have that same ability to do that. So, for instance, when I was born, my mom was an enrolled member of the Big Pine Tribe. My dad was an enrolled member of the Northern Arapaho Tribe. When I was born, I was neither. my parents had to decide where to enroll me. I met the requirements to be enrolled in Big Pine. I met the requirements to be enrolled in Wyoming, or with the Northern Arapaho Tribe. I also met the requirements to be enrolled with the Bishop Tribe. I could actually be a Bishop Tribal member if I wanted to be, or if my parents decided to be. But they decided to enroll me with the Northern Arapaho Tribe, so that's where I'm enrolled at. But that actually has been another influence on me because of the fact that there's also two tribal cultures that I've been exposed to. Not only just the Paiute culture here, but the Northern Arapaho at them. One is, a Great Basin-based tribe here locally. The other is a Plains tribe. They hunted buffalo and lived in teepees. There's a really good contrast there, but I feel like that's only helped expose me to more, which has only been a benefit. Explain to people that there are literally hundreds of tribes in the United States. Literally hundreds of tribes. They all have a different way of life. They all had a different culture. They all had a different language. They all had different ceremonies. They all had different belief systems, forms of government. They all had different ways of life. And like you're saying, I think that one thing that does come up is that people just, when they think of tribes or they think of Indian people, they kind of put them all into that. They lived in teepees and hunted buffalo. But I think it's important that when we have the opportunity to try to educate people about the fact that there's tribes here that are just as different as anywhere else. There's, the coastal tribes are a lot different than the Plains tribes, than the Southwest tribes, than the Great Lakes tribes. They all approach life differently. They all looked at the world differently. They all had different ceremonies. They all had different belief systems. They all had different food systems. They all had different ways of taking care of their communities and their people. And I know that that's hard because of the fact that there are, like it's been perpetuated in pop culture and everything of, tribes being certain ways. But it is important, I think, that we do educate people. Like everyone was different. Tribes were different. And especially here locally, they had a different way of doing things than even the tribes that were a little bit further north. They did things differently. So I guess my answer to that would be just to try to educate people that tribes are different and they had a different way of doing things. And I'll talk about that actually a little bit further on, of how important that is, that we do have those differences and that you can even though all those tribes did things differently, there's value in all of those, in everything that they did, and that's something I'll talk a little bit more about. But I think just educating, and I think that, so, and I'm talking about tribal cultures here, but really this can go for any culture anywhere in the world, I feel. And what we're really talking about, and this is something I learned early on, and it was really that there are thousands of cultures all over the world. They all look at the world differently. They all do things differently. But they're all right. And when I say that, what I mean is they were all effective in taking care of their people, taking care of their communities. So tribes here in North America are no different. What the tribes here did is they really developed effective ways to live, and they had solutions for a lot of the challenges, or for the challenges that their people and their communities faced. Now, I also like to just kind of say that, over the past 500 years, the world's changed a lot. But I think what we need as people, hasn't really changed all that much. And what I really try to highlight with this and with anything that I do, but especially when talking about tribes, is that tribal cultures developed very effective ways to address human needs. And if you learn about tribes, and if you learn about their ceremonies and their belief systems and the things that they did, I always think it's kind of impressive for some of the solutions that they came up with. They understood what their communities needed. And I'm not just talking about how to get food and how to make a shelter and how to live like that, but they also understood what they needed on a spiritual level. They understood the need for their physical health, their mental health, their emotional health. They developed effective solutions for all these things. People don't understand that a lot of the medicines we have today were actually derived from medicines that tribes developed. Mostly, a lot of it comes from like South American tribes, but a lot of the medicines we have today were developed from medicines that tribes had. And there's a lot of things, a lot of the foods we eat now were developed from tribes. Those are types of things that people don't really connect, but tribes, in my opinion, were very advanced. They understood a lot of these things, and they incorporated that into their culture and into their belief systems. They use that to help create healthy communities and healthy people. One example I'll use for this is locally, the Paiute people here, they have a ceremony when somebody passes away. And this ceremony is meant to help that person pass on to the next world. It's really the community's way of letting the world know that this person is passing on, and it's to help them pass on to the next world. But from my own personal experience, what I've also found is that ceremony itself really helps the healing process for the family in the community. It really addresses the grief that's there, and it really helps people come together and show their support for that family that's lost somebody. In addition to that, the tribe here also understood that when you lose somebody, that's going to hurt. That's going to take time for you to heal. So they actually give you a whole year to grieve and to heal. After that year, then they do another ceremony where you actually kind of let go of everything, and you need to move on with your life. But that whole process, that whole ceremony that was created there, that was developed to help not only that person that passed, but it was also there to help that community and help that family that lost somebody. And you can look at a lot of different cultures that way. A lot of the tribal cultures, they develop these systems to really help their people, and it shows. A lot of the tribes had very effective forms of government. People don't really realize that when they think about tribal cultures, but they had very effective governments back then. They had very effective ways of dealing with disputes that came up within their communities. They developed all these things that were really meant to just help their community stay strong. Even a lot of the values that tribes instilled in their youth were meant to help their youth be good people, to help have good, strong communities. Things like respect and humility, generosity. These were all values that a lot of tribes instilled in their kids when they were very young. And what that did is when those people grew up, it helped them to become good people. And I think tribes understood how important that is for us to be good people, and that's going to make you have a strong community. These tribes developed the most effective ways to live in the areas where they lived. And I think that there's still a lot of value there. I think there's still a lot of things that we can take from those tribal cultures and we could use today that can help people. So now I'll talk a little bit about those pieces that are out there. And you can kind of see like how this is all coming together. All those things that influence me are going to be a part of the work that I do. So this piece, take only what you need. This is really this was really inspired by the tribal belief that we do have limited resources. Tribes, I think, understood that. Now, tribes might have understood it for their territory and the area that they lived in, that those resources are limited. But now we're starting to see how important that is on a global level. Our resources, they're not infinite. We're going to run out. At some point, we're going to hit that wall. But that's something that tribes understood. It might not have been on a global level, but they understood that you can't continue to take and take and take. You're going to run out. And so that's something that they instilled in their people, and they use that as a teaching tool. And so you can ensure for future generations that those resources are still going to be there and that you can still use them. And actually this piece, it was painted on a piece of rawhide. And that actually has a good story behind it too, because that was actually from a deer that I harvested a few years back. But that was actually the first time I've ever painted on rawhide like that, so it was a new experience for me, but it turned out pretty good, and I was happy with how it all came out. But that's really the kind of the idea and the inspiration behind that piece. So this one right here, and again, this is also a piece that's been inspired by just my own personal likes. So that axe was actually one that I restored. What I had was just the head, that double bit head. It was an old rusty head that I got somewhere, and I cleaned it up, put a new handle on it, and decided to use it for this piece. And what this one was really inspired by lightning strikes that cause fires. I know those can be very devastating. Forest fires can cause a lot of damage, but really that's more of a natural occurrence when lightning strikes do it. And there's a lot of forests and a lot of plants that actually depend on that for a fire to come through from time to time, for them to grow and for them to, even their seeds will open up and stuff in the heat. But that's really what was inspired by this piece. And actually at the bottom there, that dark spot, the dark end of the handle there is actually burned. I burned that and sanded it down because it was meant to look like a burnt piece of timber. And for these pieces, the other axes too, I really tried to, they're also very functional. When I cleaned them up and I restored them, I tried to also put on there the best handles that I could find. You could actually, all you'd have to do is sharpen that axe and you could actually use it. And that's something I like to keep that function there for these pieces. Again, this was another axe that I restored. Put a handle on it, cleaned up the head. It's not sharp; it would have to be sharpened to be able to use it, but you could use it. This one, a lot of times I like to wake up early in the morning and I'll be outside, and so really that was the inspiration for this piece. The design on that handle is actually, for me, what it looks like for the mountains and the sky early in the morning. You can see the mountains, they're darker, but then it'll fade from a lighter blue to a darker blue as you go up. And that's actually the inspiration for that piece. It was an idea that I've had for a long time, and this was just kind of me putting that into motion. Also, you guys will notice that these designs on the designs that I use, those are also inspired by the local Paiute culture. The Paiute people here, one of the things that they're very, very well known for are their basket designs. And so that's something that I've taken a lot of inspiration from. So a lot of these designs, they are inspired from Paiute basket designs. So this one actually has a good story behind it too. These are actually deer sheds that I found while I was hunting. This again was a few years back. But this is kind of actually my show of respect to the local mule deer. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the mule deer, but anybody that spends any time around them, they'll let you know how special they are. There's times when I've been amazed by some of the things that they do. This one in particular, I found these sheds. I came over a ridge, and I found this pair of sheds under a tree. I thought that was really cool, so I picked them up and I was taking them back with me. And as I came around that ridge, sitting under a tree was probably one of the biggest mule deer I've ever seen. Big deer. And I actually want to say he was probably the one that dropped these, because his antlers at the time looked very, very similar to those, just bigger. So I like to say that I actually saw the deer that dropped those sheds too. But he jumped up, and I wasn't expecting to see him. It was great though to see him, and he took off, and I never seen him again after that. But it was actually a really good experience for me. And for those deer, especially those older bucks, if you guys ever hunted or spend any time around them, you guys will understand how smart they are. They'll find some great places to hide and to sit. That one in particular he was sitting on the south side of a mountain, and he was in a perfect spot to see anything that was going to come up from the valley. And the only reason I scared him is because I came over the top and dropped right in on top of him. That was the only reason I got to see him. If I was coming up from the bottom, he would have been gone before I even got close to him. So those types of experiences right there, they do have an impact on me. And this is just kind of my show of respect to those deer, because they are pretty special animals. This was kind of another one that I had an idea for a while. And you can't really see it too well on this picture, but the dark brown at the bottom is actually just stained wood. It's not paint. The white is paint. So here locally, the water has really become, and it's probably always been a very important resource for the people in the communities here. And a part of that is the winters that we have here. They bring a lot of the snow and the ice and things that on the mountains, and then that'll melt and it'll fill the valleys with water. So really that's kind of what the idea was here, is that the design on that axe was snow. And really, like I said, that's always been something that's so important here, and for every human being, every living thing needs water. And so that's something I did want to try to acknowledge with this piece. This was another one, and actually this one was inspired by an actual basket. So I saw this basket design, and I read the description on it, and it actually said that it was meant to be symbolize a storm, and the design on it it's definitely one of the best baskets I've ever seen, and it was a really incredible. And that's something too, like I have to acknowledge the basket makers that created some of these baskets out there. They were some incredible artists. They not only had the ability to create a very nice basket, but they created the designs on it. They even put meaning behind it, and they were just as much artists as anybody else. But that's actually my idea for this, where my idea for this one came from. So this one was also supposed to, symbolize a storm, like a winter storm. Snow and cold is really what I was trying to go for with that one. This axe I did not restore. This one I actually bought, and it's a Hudson Bay axe, so it's actually a smaller axe. But it's also one that you could just sharpen and use if you wanted to. Now this is the last piece, and this one was really my way to acknowledge what the tribes went through, not just locally, but really across the entire United States. And really all of North and South America, when pretty much since first contact with Europeans, there's been conflict here in the Americas. And then as the United States was formed, and pushed west, there was more conflict with, and pretty much every tribe has seen conflict. But really what I wanted to do here is just acknowledge the fact that the tribes themselves, what they were doing is they were just trying to protect their culture, protect their way of life, protect their people. A lot of them just wanted to be left alone, to live how they felt was the best way to live. And because of things like the government, they kind of forced that view on the tribes to try to change them. Created things like the reservation system, assimilation. A lot of the federal policies that we have now were a reflection of the government, trying to force a different lifestyle on tribes and trying to change them. And unfortunately, that's a part of American history that a lot of people maybe don't like to acknowledge, but it is. It's a big part of history, and especially for tribes, it's a huge part of their history on where they are now, how they became where they're at, why they are what they are now. And even being here at Manzanar, I mean, the history behind Manzanar itself is another reflection of, it's kind of ironic that, we're the land of the free and the home of the brave, but there's been so much conflict and persecution for people just being different. And that's something that I wanted to highlight with this piece too. It's just, it is a part of our culture and a part of our history. So, and that pretty much covers it. So that's all the pieces, and